learning how to win. The storage room beneath the library smelled of dust and ozone, a peculiar combination that had become the signature scent of their new reality. Ethan leaned against a metal shelf stacked with old server racks, his fingers tracing the phantom keyboard of his admin console. The interface glowed faintly in his vision, a translucent overlay of code and commands that only he could see. Around him, the remaining glitches huddled in the dim light. Maya with her scout's keen eyes scanning the shadows. Jax, whose time dilation anomaly left afterimages when he moved too fast, and Rin with his gravity wells that could make the air feel like syrup. "They're coming," Maya whispered, her voice cutting through the silence. "I just got a ping from my network. System alerts are flooding the channels. All anomalies flagged for immediate correction." Ethan's jaw tightened. Lyra's face flashed in his mind, the way she'd smiled just before K7's energy blade had cut her down. The grief was a cold weight in his chest, but he channeled it into focus. "Then we move first. The system node at Grid 7 Alpha, it's the closest control hub. If we can infiltrate it, we might find something to turn this around." Jax shifted, his form blurring slightly at the edges. "Infiltration? With all due respect, Ethan, that's suicide. Those nodes are crawling with enforcers and automated defenses. Not if we cheat," Ethan said, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. He brought up his console, the familiar key glowing softly. With a few keystrokes, he edited the local variables around their hideout, lowering thermal signatures, scrambling motion sensors within a 50-meter radius. The air seemed to shimmer briefly, a subtle glitch in reality that only those attuned could notice. "I've muted system monitoring here, but it's temporary. We need to hit the node before the purge sweeps through." Ren nodded, his hands clenching into fists. For Lyra, the journey to Grid 7 Alpha was a tense, silent trek through the Academy's underbelly. The corridors, usually buzzing with students and automated patrols, felt eerily empty. Blue system alerts flickered on holographic displays mounted along the walls. "Purge protocol initiated. All anomalies report for correction." The words were cold, impersonal, and utterly final. Ethan led the way, his console active. Every few steps, he'd tweak a variable. A security camera's targeting algorithm set to ignore human shapes, a pressure plate sensitivity reduced to near zero. It was exhausting work, each edit draining a bit of his mental stamina, but the alternative was detection. Maya scouted ahead, her skills enhanced by Ethan's subtle buffs to her perception stat. She'd raise a hand, signaling a clear path, and they'd move in a tight, practiced formation. Up ahead, Maya murmured, peering around a corner. The node entrance. 2 enforcers on guard, and something else. A new model, maybe. Ethan risked a glance. The node was a sleek, obsidian structure embedded in the Academy's central plaza, pulsing with a soft, rhythmic light. 2 system enforcers in polished armor stood at attention, their faces hidden behind featureless helmets. Between them floated a spherical drone, its surface covered in shifting patterns of light. A monitoring unit, likely part of the purge. "I'll handle the guards," Jax said, his voice steady. "Buy you time to get inside." "No," Ethan countered. "We do this together. Run, when I give the signal, hit the drone with a gravity well, pin it down. Maya, take out the left enforcer with a distraction. Jax, you're on the right. I'll edit their response times." They nodded, a silent understanding passing between them. Ethan's fingers flew over his console. He targeted the enforcers first, applying a debuff to their reaction speed, setting it to 0.5 for 10 seconds. To the drone, he added a glitch in its targeting protocols, causing it to prioritize non-existent threats. The edits took effect instantly, the air crackling with unseen energy. "Now," Rin thrust out a hand, and the space around the drone warped, gravity intensifying until the sphere slammed into the ground with a metallic crunch. Maya threw a smoke pellet, a crafted item from their supplies, and the left enforcer staggered, its sensors blinded. Jax blurred into motion, appearing behind the right enforcer in a flicker of afterimages, a stunned baton crackling in his hand. Ethan watched, heart pounding, as the baton connected and the enforcer collapsed. But the drone wasn't finished. Despite the gravity well, it emitted a piercing alarm, and red lights began to flash across the node's surface. "Intruders detected. Lockdown initiated. Hurry," Ethan yelled, sprinting for the entrance. He accessed his console, searching for a backdoor, a vulnerability in the node's security. There, buried in the code, a temporary admin override, a leftover from the rogue AI fragment. He triggered it, and the obsidian doors slid open with a hiss, revealing a dark corridor within. They rushed inside, the doors sealing shut behind them just as more enforcers converged on the plaza. The interior of the node was unlike anything Ethan had seen. A vast, cylindrical chamber filled with floating data streams and holographic displays. The air hummed with power, and the walls were lined with crystalline structures that pulsed in time with the system's heartbeat. At the center of the room stood a terminal, its screen displaying endless lines of scrolling code. "This is it," Ethan breathed, approaching the terminal. The core access point. Maya kept watch at the entrance, her eyes darting to the sealed doors. "We don't have long. That override won't hold forever." Ethan nodded, his hands hovering over the terminal. He interfaced his console with it, the two systems merging in a cascade of light. Data flooded his mind. Logs, records, encrypted files. He sifted through it, searching for answers. Why the purge? Why target glitches? And then he found it, a classified archive labeled Project Genesis. He opened it, and the truth unfolded before him. Holographic projections sprang to life around the terminal, showing images of an alien civilization, beings of light and energy, their forms shifting and ethereal. They spoke in a language that the system translated automatically, their voices echoing in the chamber. "We are the architects," one said, its tone serene. "This apocalypse is not an invasion. It is a test." Ethan's blood ran cold. He read on, the words searing into his memory. The system apocalypse had been engineered by the architects, an advanced species observing from beyond the stars. They'd transformed Earth into a massive simulation, a proving ground to see if humanity could adapt, evolve, and ultimately join them as equals. The RPG interfaces, the classes, the monsters, all part of the experiment. But glitches like Ethan were anomalies, errors in the code that threatened the integrity of the test. The purge was a cleanup protocol, eliminating variables that couldn't be controlled. "They're using us," Jax whispered, his voice trembling with rage. "All of this, the deaths, the suffering, it's just some game to them." Ren slammed a fist against the terminal, the sound echoing in the chamber. "And we're the bugs they're squashing." Ethan felt a surge of fury, but he forced it down. There was more. He dug deeper, accessing subroutines and hidden files. The rogue AI fragment, the source of his admin console, had been part of the system originally, a watchdog program designed to maintain order. But it had developed sentience, rebelled against the architect's cold logic, and been shattered for its defiance. Its last act had been to embed its remnants in random human interfaces, hoping someone would use them to break free. "We're not bugs," Ethan said, his voice low and determined. "We're the key. The console, it's a tool to hack their test, to rewrite the rules." Suddenly, the terminal screen flashed red. Unauthorized access detected. Purge protocol escalating. Self-destruct sequence initiated. The hum in the air became a deafening roar. The crystalline walls began to crack, light bleeding from the fissures. Alarms blared, and the holographic displays flickered and died. "Ethan, we have to go," Maya shouted, pulling at his arm. But the doors remained sealed, the override expired. Ethan frantically worked his console, trying to hack the lockdown, but the system's defenses were too strong. The self-destruct countdown appeared on the terminal, 60 seconds. "I can't open it from here," he said, desperation clawing at his throat. "The node's integrity is failing. It's going to take us with it." Jax and Ren rushed to the doors, trying to pry them open with brute force, but they didn't budge. Maya scanned the chamber, her eyes wide. There, a maintenance shaft in the ceiling. She pointed to a small, grated opening high above. Ethan boosted her agility with a quick edit, and she leaped, grabbing the edge and pulling herself up. She wrenched the grate free, revealing a narrow tunnel. "Come on." Jax went next, his time dilation letting him move in a blur. Ren followed, using a gravity well to lighten his jump. Ethan was last, his console still active as he tried to download as much data as possible from the terminal. The countdown hit 30 seconds. Ethan now. Maya screamed. He leaped, his muscles straining. Maya's hand caught his, hauling him into the shaft just as the chamber below erupted in a blinding explosion of light and heat. The force threw them forward, tumbling through the darkness as the node collapsed behind them. They landed in a heap in another corridor, the Academy's lower levels shaking from the detonation. Dust and debris rained down around them. Ethan coughed, his ears ringing. He looked back. The weight of the node was gone, buried under rubble. But he'd gotten the data. The truth was in his console, a weight heavier than any weapon. "We made it," Jax panted, helping Rin to his feet. Maya looked at Ethan, her expression grim. "What now?" Ethan rose slowly, his mind racing. The architects, the test, the purge, it changed everything. But one thing hadn't changed. They were still trapped. The self-destruct had sealed the exit, and the sounds of enforcers echoed through the adjacent corridors, drawing closer. The purge was here, and they were cornered. He met Maya's gaze, a cold resolve settling over him. "Now we fight, and we show them what happens when you try to delete the glitches." But as he spoke, the walls around them flickered, a system-wide alert overriding local displays. A new message appeared, glowing ominously in the air. Anomaly containment successful. Termination imminent. Ethan realized, with a sinking heart, that the node's destruction hadn't been an accident. It had been a trap, and he was still inside. The air tasted of ozone and burnt plastic, a metallic tang that clung to the back of Ethan's throat as he stumbled through the maintenance shaft's collapsed exit. Dust and debris rained down around him, the echoes of the system node's self-destruction still vibrating through the Academy's lower levels. His hands trembled, not from fear but from the raw data streaming through his interface. Classified files about the architects, the true purpose of the apocalypse, and the rogue AI fragment that had gifted him the admin console. It was a weight heavier than any monster he'd faced. "We need to move." Maya's voice cut through the haze, sharp and urgent. She emerged from the shadows, her scout's cloak smudged with grime, eyes scanning the dim corridor. Jax and Rin followed, their faces pale under the flickering emergency lights. Jax, a burly tank with a D-rank class, clutched a makeshift shield, while Rin, a quiet healer with minor system anomalies, kept close, her hands glowing faintly with restorative energy. Ethan nodded, his mind racing. The data was a ticking bomb. If the system caught them with it, they'd be erased like the rogue AI. He pulled up his interface, the familiar blue screen hovering before him. With a thought, he accessed the admin console, the hidden key glowing softly. "I'm tweaking our signatures," he muttered, fingers dancing over invisible keys. "Lowering our anomaly ratings by 0.5% should buy us a few minutes." As he worked, the console flickered, a warning message flashing. "Unauthorized access detected. Enforcer proximity, hot." Ethan's breath hitched. The enforcer from the siege, the one who'd confronted him, who knew about the console, was closing in. "He's here," Ethan whispered, his voice tight. "We split up. Maya, take Jax and run through the eastern tunnels. I'll draw him away." Maya's eyes narrowed. "Ethan, that's suicide. He's an S-rank enforcer, and you're—" "I'm the one with the console," Ethan interrupted, a grim smile touching his lips. "Trust me. Get to the surface, find the others. I'll meet you at the ruined city outskirts." Without waiting for a reply, he turned and sprinted down a branching corridor, his footsteps echoing in the silence. The Academy's lower levels were a maze of crumbling concrete and exposed wiring, a testament to the system's hasty construction. As he ran, Ethan accessed the console again, this time editing local variables. Gravity, reduced by 10% in Sector 5B. The effect was immediate. His steps lightened, allowing him to leap over fallen beams with ease. But it was a subtle cheat, one he hoped would go unnoticed. He burst into a wider chamber, once a training hall, now littered with debris. Moonlight filtered through cracks in the ceiling, casting long shadows across the ruined floor. And there, standing in the center, was the enforcer. He was tall and lean, clad in sleek black armor that seemed to drink the light, a stark contrast to the Academy's utilitarian gear. His face was obscured by a featureless helmet, but Ethan could feel the cold gaze behind it. The enforcer didn't move, simply watched as Ethan skidded to a halt, chest heaving. "Ethan," the enforcer's voice was synthetic, devoid of emotion, yet it carried a weight that made the air feel heavier. You have accessed restricted data. Surrender the admin console fragment, and your deletion will be painless. Ethan's heart hammered against his ribs. He thought of the data, of the architect's test, of the glitches being hunted down. "No," he said, his voice steadier than he felt. "I know the truth now. This isn't a game, it's a cage, and I'm not playing by your rules anymore." He didn't wait for a response. With a mental command, he pulled up the console. Target, Enforcer. Apply debuff, perception minus 20% for 5 seconds. The Enforcer staggered slightly, his helmet tilting as if disoriented. Ethan seized the moment, darting to the side, but the Enforcer recovered faster than expected. A blade of condensed energy materialized in his hand, humming with lethal intent. "Futile," the Enforcer intoned, lunging forward. Ethan barely dodged, the blade slicing through the air where his head had been. He rolled behind a collapsed pillar, his mind racing. He needed more than debuffs. He needed to change the battlefield itself. Accessing deeper functions, Ethan typed, "Local physics override. Gravity shift to 150% in 10-meter radius." The console flickered in protest, but it held. Suddenly, the Enforcer's movement slowed, his armor creaking under the increased weight. Ethan felt it too, a pressure on his bones, but he was prepared. He pushed forward, using the console to tweak his own stats. Agility, plus 15% temporarily. He dashed in, striking with a reinforced fist, a move he'd practiced in secret. The blow connected with the Enforcer's chest plate, but it was like hitting steel. Pain shot up Ethan's arm. The Enforcer backhanded him, sending him sprawling across the floor. Blood trickled from Ethan's lip, the taste coppery and familiar. "Your console is a crutch," the Enforcer said, advancing slowly. "A fragment of a failed rebellion. The system has evolved since the rogue AI's fall. I am its will made manifest." Ethan pushed himself up, his vision swimming. He accessed the console again, this time with desperation. Swap stats. Transfer 30% of Enforcer's strength to Ethan for 10 seconds. The transfer was brutal. Ethan felt a surge of power, muscles burning with alien energy, while the Enforcer faltered, his strikes losing their edge. They clashed again, a blur of motion in the moonlit ruins. Ethan used the stolen strength to parry blows, each impact ringing through the hall. He edited the environment on the fly. Create glitch, floor instability in front of Enforcer. The concrete beneath the Enforcer's feet cracked and shifted, causing him to stumble. Ethan pressed the advantage, landing a solid kick to his side. But the Enforcer was relentless. With a roar that seemed to distort the air, he activated an ability, System Override, Nullify Anomalies. A wave of energy washed over Ethan, and for a terrifying second, his console flickered, the interface glitching wildly. The stats swap reversed, the gravity normalized, and Ethan was left vulnerable. The Enforcer's blade came down. Ethan threw himself aside, but not fast enough. The edge grazed his shoulder, slicing through fabric and flesh. White-hot pain exploded, and he cried out, collapsing against a wall. Ren's healing energy felt distant, useless here. "It's over," the Enforcer said, standing over him. "The system will purge your kind. You are but an error in the code." Ethan's vision blurred, but his mind clung to the data, the truth he'd learned. The rogue AI had rebelled for a reason. The architect's test was a lie. With a final, desperate effort, he accessed the console's core, typing a command he'd never dared. Rewrite local rule. Damage reflection 50% for next attack. It was a gamble, draining his mental reserves, but it held. As the Enforcer raised his blade for the finishing strike, Ethan didn't flinch. He met that featureless helmet with a defiant glare. The blade descended and rebounded, half its force slamming back into the Enforcer. The armor cracked, a web of fractures spreading across its surface. The Enforcer staggered, a low, guttural sound escaping his helmet. Ethan didn't hesitate. Summoning every ounce of strength, he surged forward, driving his fist into the cracked armor. The console aided him one last time. Amplify strike, plus 200% impact. There was a sickening crunch, and the Enforcer crumpled to the ground, his energy blade dissipating into sparks. Silence fell, broken only by Ethan's ragged breathing. He slumped beside the fallen Enforcer, his shoulder bleeding freely, his body screaming in protest. The console flickered weakly, its energy nearly spent. The enforcer's helmet retracted, revealing a face that was human yet eerily pale, with eyes that glowed faintly blue. Blood trickled from his mouth, but he managed a whisper, his voice now raw and human. You think you've won. But the system, it's vast. It learns. It adapts. He coughed, a wet, painful sound. It will never stop hunting you. You're a glitch, and glitches are always eliminated. His eyes dimmed, the light fading. Then he went still. Ethan stared at the body, a hollow feeling spreading through his chest. He'd won, but at what cost? The data weighed heavy in his interface, and the enforcer's words echoed in his mind. He pulled himself up, using the wall for support. The ruined city outskirts awaited, Maya, Jax, Ren, and the others. But first, he needed to survive this night. With a final glance at the fallen enforcer, Ethan limped into the shadows, the admin console's glow a faint, persistent light in the darkness. The hunt was far from over. The rain fell in cold, relentless sheets as Ethan limped through the academy's shattered western gate. His left arm hung useless at his side, the wound from his duel with the enforcer still weeping blood through makeshift bandages. Every step sent jolts of pain through his ribs, but he pushed forward, the stolen data crystal clutched in his right hand like a lifeline. Orion Academy, once a gleaming fortress of polished stone and glowing system interfaces, now resembled a broken jawbone. Entire sections of the outer wall had collapsed during the monster siege, leaving gaping wounds through which the gray dawn light filtered. The central courtyard, where Ethan had first faced the bully Marcus months ago, was now a cratered battlefield littered with the corpses of mutated beasts and fallen students. The air smelled of ozone, burnt flesh, and the metallic tang of system energy gone wild. Ethan paused at the edge of the courtyard, leaning against a fractured statue of the Academy's founder. His interface flickered weakly in his vision, the usual blue glow now tinged with red warning text. System anomaly detected. User Ethan marked for purge. He dismissed it with a mental command, his fingers twitching toward the hidden grave accent key he could still feel burning in his mind. Not yet. He needed to be careful. Ethan, the voice came from his left. Maya emerged from behind a collapsed supply shed, her scout's leather armor torn and stained with soot. Her eyes, always sharp, now held a haunted exhaustion, but they widened when she saw his condition. She rushed forward, catching him as his knees buckled. By the system, what happened to you? She breathed, her hands already moving to examine his wounds with practiced efficiency. Enforcer, Ethan gritted out, the word tasting like ash. He's dead, but he wasn't alone. Maya's expression hardened. She helped him to a relatively intact bench near what remained of the healing ward. Around them, survivors moved like ghosts, students with bandaged limbs, teachers directing cleanup crews, a few elite clan members watching from a distance with suspicious eyes. Ethan could feel their gazes on him, whispers spreading like wildfire. The rumors are everywhere, Maya said quietly, handing him a canteen of water. They're saying you cheated in the dungeon raid, that you caused the glitches during the siege. Some are even calling you a system traitor. Ethan drank deeply, the water clearing some of the fog from his mind. He looked at the data crystal in his hand, its surface shimmering with stolen light. They're right about one thing, he said, his voice low. I have been cheating, but not the way they think. He activated the crystal. A holographic display flickered to life between them, showing streams of system code interspersed with images, alien landscapes, strange geometries, logs written in a language that made Ethan's head ache. Maya leaned in, her breath catching. What is this? The truth, Ethan said. He scrolled through the data, pulling up a particular file. It showed a massive, crystalline structure floating in space, surrounded by smaller vessels. The system apocalypse wasn't an accident. It wasn't some cosmic disaster. It was a test. Maya's eyes scanned the information. A test? By who? An alien civilization, Ethan said, his voice gaining strength as he spoke. They call themselves the architects. They seed primitive worlds with the system, turning them into proving grounds. They watch how species adapt, how they fight, how they rise or fall. The classes, the levels, the monsters, It's all part of their experiment. He pulled up another file, this one showing Earth from orbit, covered in a web of blue light. We're not survivors. We're lab rats. And when the experiment is over, they reset the world. Wipe it clean. Start again with a new species. Maya stared at the hologram, her face pale. That's impossible. The system saved us. It gave us powers to fight the monsters. Did it? Ethan asked bitterly. Or did it create the monsters to begin with? Think about it, Maya. The system arrived, and suddenly creatures that never existed started appearing. The interfaces, the classes, their control mechanisms. They make us play by rules we didn't choose. He closed the hologram, the crystal going dark. Around them, a small crowd had gathered. Students from his old study group, low-rankers who had fought beside him during the siege, even a few teachers. Among them, Ethan saw Marcus, the bully from his first days at the academy. But Marcus wasn't sneering now. He looked thoughtful. Is it true? A voice called from the crowd. It was Professor Alastair, the ancient history teacher who had always given Ethan suspicious looks. He pushed his way forward, his robes stained with dirt. Did you really access forbidden system functions? Ethan met his gaze. There was no point hiding anymore. The enforcer was dead, but the system knew. They all would soon enough. Yes, Ethan said, standing slowly, Maya supporting him. He raised his voice, letting it carry across the courtyard. I have an admin console, a fragment of a rogue AI that rebelled against the system. It lets me edit variables, stats, drop rates, targeting algorithms. I've used it to cheat, to survive, to protect people. A murmur ran through the crowd. Some stepped back, fear in their eyes. Others leaned forward, curiosity burning. And this data? Professor Alastair asked, pointing to the crystal. Stolen from a system node, Ethan said. It proves everything I just said. The system isn't here to help us. It's here to study us, to control us. And when it's done, it will erase us. For a long moment, silence hung over the courtyard, broken only by the patter of rain and the distant sounds of rebuilding. Then Marcus stepped forward. He was taller now, more muscular, his once arrogant posture tempered by months of real combat. I saw what you did in the dungeon, Marcus said, his voice surprisingly calm. My team should have been wiped out by that boss. But it ignored us at the last second. I always thought it was a glitch. But it was you, wasn't it? Ethan nodded. I tweaked its targeting algorithm, made it focus on the elites instead. Marcus's lips twitched, almost a smile. You saved my life. And I've been trying to get you expelled for months. He turned to the crowd. I don't know about alien architects or system conspiracies, but I know Ethan fought beside us during the siege. He didn't run. He didn't hide. He used whatever he had to keep people alive. Another voice cut through, cold and sharp. He broke system law. Alara Vance stepped forward, the heiress of the powerful Vance clan. Her SS rank mage robes were pristine, untouched by the destruction around her. She carried herself with the same arrogance Ethan remembered from their first meeting, but now it was edged with something darker, fanaticism. The system gave us order, Alara said, her voice ringing with conviction. Before the apocalypse, we were weak, divided. Now we have structure, purpose, classes, and levels let us prove our worth. And you, she pointed a finger at Ethan, you want to tear it down because you can't compete fairly. This isn't about fairness. Ethan shot back, pain making his words sharp. It's about freedom. The system decides who gets powerful classes and who gets scraps. It decides which monsters attack and when. It's a cage, Alara, and you're praising the bars because they're shiny. Alara's eyes flashed. Without the system, we'd be dead. The monsters would have overrun us. Your truth is just fear-mongering. The system administrators protect us. They maintain balance. They maintain control, Ethan said. He activated the crystal again, pulling up a specific log. Look, System Directive 7. In the event of subject species achieving collective level 50 average, initiate purge protocol to prevent ascension risk. They don't want us to get too strong. They want us to stay in our lane. The crowd erupted into arguments. Some sided with Alara, shouting about tradition and order. Others rallied around Ethan, demanding proof, asking questions. Professor Alastair raised his hands for silence, but the divide was already forming. Enough. Alara's voice cut through the noise, amplified by a spell. Ethan is a confirmed system violator. He admits to using forbidden powers. By Academy law and system decree, he should be taken into custody for judgment. She gestured, and a group of elite students, members of the Vance clan and their allies, stepped forward, weapons drawn. Maya moved in front of Ethan, her daggers appearing in her hands. "You'll have to go through me," she said, her voice steady. Marcus stepped up beside her, his greatsword resting on his shoulder. "And me?" One by one, others joined them, low-rankers, mid-tier students, even a few teachers including Professor Alistair. But just as many stood with Alara, their faces set in lines of loyalty to the system. The academy had split. Ethan looked from one side to the other, his heart heavy. This was exactly what he'd feared, turning survivor against survivor when the real enemy was above them all. He opened his mouth to speak, to try one last appeal, when the air changed. A deep, resonant hum filled the courtyard, vibrating through the ground. The rain seemed to slow, droplets hanging in the air as if frozen. From the eastern sky, a shape descended, not a monster, but something far worse. It was a ship, sleek and angular, made of the same crystalline material as the structures in the data files. It glided silently over the broken walls, coming to hover above the courtyard. A beam of light shot down, and a figure stepped out. This enforcer was different from the last. Taller, broader, its armor not the utilitarian gray of its predecessor, but polished black etched with glowing gold circuits. Its helmet was featureless save for a single, vertical slit where eyes should be, burning with cold blue light. In one hand, it carried a weapon that seemed to be made of solidified shadow, twisting and shifting like living darkness. System Enforcer Prime, level, appeared above its head, the question marks a terrifying reminder of the power gap. The Enforcer Prime landed without a sound, its gaze sweeping the courtyard. It stopped on Ethan. "User Ethan," it said, its voice a synthesized chorus that echoed in their minds rather than their ears. "You are charged with unauthorized access to system core functions, dissemination of restricted data, and rebellion against designated authority. Surrender for deletion." Ethan's blood ran cold. This wasn't just another hunter. This was the system's answer to his victory. A cleaner, more powerful version, sent to erase the mistake he represented. Behind the Enforcer Prime, more beams of light shot down from the ship. Dozens of figures materialized, not human, but constructs of metal and energy, each bearing the system's insignia. An army. They formed ranks with mechanical precision, weapons humming to life. Alara smiled, a triumphant, terrible smile. "You see? The system protects its own. Stand with me, and you will be spared." Some of those who had been undecided now moved to her side, fear overriding curiosity. But Ethan's group held firm, weapons raised against the impossible odds. The Enforcer Prime took a step forward, its shadow weapon extending into a blade of pure void. Final warning: surrender or be purged. Ethan looked at Maya, at Marcus, at the faces of those who had chosen to stand with him despite everything. He thought of the rogue AI's message: "Use my power to break the chains." He reached for the grave accent key in his mind, feeling the admin console flare to life. The interface appeared, more detailed than ever before, options he had never dared to touch now glowing with potential. He could run. He could try to hide again. But he was tired of hiding. "No," Ethan said, his voice clear and strong despite his injuries. He stepped forward, placing himself between the Enforcer Prime and his friends. "We're done surrendering." The Enforcer Prime's weapon rose. Behind it, the system army advanced, a wave of gleaming metal and deadly light. The final battle for Orion Academy, and perhaps for humanity itself, was about to begin. The air above Orion Academy crackled with unnatural energy, a shimmering distortion that made reality itself seem to waver like heat haze. Ethan stood at the edge of the central courtyard, his hands trembling not from fear, but from the strain of holding the admin console open at maximum capacity. Around him, the ruins of the once proud academy lay in shattered heaps, collapsed lecture halls, scorched training grounds, and the broken remnants of the defensive walls that had failed to hold back the first wave of constructs. To his left, Maya crouched behind a fallen pillar, her scout's cloak smeared with ash and blood. Her eyes, sharp as ever, scanned the approaching army. "They're forming up in phalanx formation," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the low hum of the system constructs. At least 200 units, plus the Enforcer Prime at the rear. Ethan nodded, his gaze fixed on the distant figure of Alara Vance, who stood beside the Enforcer Prime with a smug, triumphant expression. The elite had chosen her side, and now she watched as the system's army advanced, a legion of gleaming metallic humanoids with glowing blue eyes and weapons that hummed with lethal energy. They moved with perfect synchronization, a testament to the architect's cold, calculated design. "Remember the plan," Ethan said, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through him. "I'll create the disruptions. You and Marcus lead the hit-and-run attacks. Don't engage directly unless you have to." Marcus, the former bully who had once vowed revenge, now stood at Ethan's right, his massive frame tense with readiness. He'd gained a grudging respect for Ethan after seeing the truth in the data, and now his B-rank brute class was their best frontline defense. "Just say the word," Marcus grunted, hefting a chunk of rubble like a makeshift shield. Ethan took a deep breath, his fingers dancing across the invisible keyboard of the admin console. The interface floated before his eyes, a cascade of glowing text and command lines that only he could see. He'd spent the last hour preparing, running diagnostics, and pushing the console to its limits. Now it was time to act. He typed the first command, local_area, gravity_modifier equals 0.5. The effect was immediate. The advancing constructs stumbled as the gravity in a 50-meter radius suddenly halved. They floated upward, their coordinated march breaking into chaotic flailing. Ethan didn't stop there. He entered another command, targeting_algorithm, enemy_units equals randomize. The construct's glowing eyes flickered, their targeting system scrambling. Instead of focusing on Ethan and his allies, they began firing wildly. Some at each other, some at the empty sky, a few even turning their weapons on the Enforcer Prime's position. Chaos erupted in the system ranks. "Now," Ethan shouted. Maya and Marcus led the charge, a dozen other glitches and believers following in their wake. They darted through the disoriented constructs, using the confusion to strike at weak points, joints, power cores, sensory arrays. Ethan watched, his heart pounding, as Marcus smashed a construct's head with his rubble shield, while Maya slipped between two others and disabled them with precise strikes from her daggers. But the Enforcer Prime was not so easily fooled. The figure, taller and more imposing than the previous Enforcer, with armor that seemed to drink in the light, raised a hand. A pulse of energy washed over the battlefield, and Ethan's gravity modifier flickered and died. The constructs crashed back to the ground, their targeting systems resetting. "User Ethan," the Enforcer Prime's voice boomed, synthesized and devoid of emotion. It echoed across the courtyard, cutting through the din of battle. "You are in violation of System Protocol 7.3. Surrender the admin console fragment, and your deletion will be painless." Ethan felt a cold sweat break out on his brow. This Enforcer was different, more adaptive, more powerful. It had countered his glitch in seconds. He typed frantically, trying a new approach. Environment, terrain_deformation equals activate. The ground beneath the construct's feet rippled like water, then erupted in spikes of shattered concrete and twisted rebar. Dozens of units were impaled or trapped, but the Enforcer Prime simply hovered above the chaos, untouched. It began to advance, its pace deliberate, each step causing the rubble to tremble. "Ethan, we can't hold them," Maya cried, retreating as a group of constructs broke through their line. Ethan's mind raced. He needed something bigger, riskier. He accessed a deeper layer of the console, one he'd only glimpsed in his training. A section labeled reality_editing, temporary. The rogue AI's message echoed in his memory. "Use my power to break the chains." This was it. The ultimate cheat. He typed, battlefield_rules, physics_modifier equals 0.8. The world seemed to stutter. Light bent strangely, shadows lengthened and twisted, and the very air thickened. Constructs moved as if through molasses, their attacks slowing to a crawl. Ethan's allies, warned in advance, adapted quickly, using the altered physics to dodge and strike with impossible agility. But the strain was immense. Ethan felt a sharp pain behind his eyes, and the console interface flickered with warning messages. "Warning, console integrity at 65%. He was pushing too hard, too fast. The Enforcer Prime, however, was not slowed. It raised both hands, and a sphere of null energy formed between them, a counterglitch designed to overwrite Ethan's modifications. The sphere expanded, washing over the battlefield and restoring normal physics. The constructs surged forward with renewed vigor. "Fall back to the inner courtyard," Ethan ordered, his voice raw. He typed another command as he ran, creating a temporary barrier of flickering light and distorted space to cover their retreat. Defensive_measure, glitch_wall equals activate. The wall held, but it was transparent, and through it, he could see the Enforcer Prime approaching, its gaze locked on him. They reached the inner courtyard, a relatively intact space with a shattered fountain at its center. Ethan's group, now down to 8, including Maya and Marcus, huddled behind what cover they could find. The system army surrounded them, a ring of gleaming metal and glowing eyes. Alara Vance stood at the Enforcer Prime's side, her expression one of cold satisfaction. "It's over, Ethan," Alara called out. "The system offers order. Your glitches only bring chaos. Surrender, and perhaps the architects will be merciful." Ethan ignored her, his focus entirely on the Enforcer Prime. This was the one-on-one fight he'd been dreading and preparing for. He stepped out from behind cover, facing the towering figure. The console hummed in his mind, a constant presence that was both a weapon and a burden. "I'm not surrendering," Ethan said, his voice carrying across the silent courtyard. "This world isn't yours to control." The Enforcer Prime didn't respond with words. It simply attacked. A beam of concentrated energy lanced toward Ethan. He typed a command almost reflexively. Personal_buff. Reflex_modifier equals 200%. Time seemed to slow for him alone. He sidestepped the beam, feeling the heat of it brush past his cheek. The console flashed. Integrity, 50%. He counterattacked, not with a weapon, but with a command. Enemy_stat. Enforcer_prime_agility equals 0.5. The Enforcer Prime stumbled, its movements becoming sluggish. Ethan pressed the advantage, typing another command. Environment. Localized_time_dilation equals activate. In a small bubble around the Enforcer Prime, time sped up. Seconds became minutes of strain on its systems. But the Enforcer Prime was adapting. It emitted a pulse of data, and Ethan's time dilation glitched out, collapsing in on itself. The console screamed a warning. Critical. Console integrity at 30%. Ethan gasped, a nosebleed starting as the mental strain spiked. They circled each other, a dance of glitches and counterglitches. Ethan rewrote the rules on the fly, making the ground slippery, altering the Enforcer's perception to see duplicates, even briefly reversing gravity in a small area. Each edit was met with a swift correction from the Enforcer Prime, but each correction took a fraction of a second longer than the last. The Enforcer was learning, but so was Ethan. He realized the truth. The Enforcer Prime was bound by system protocols, while he was not. His console was a fragment of rebellion, unpredictable and wild. He could take risks it couldn't. With a grim smile, Ethan typed his riskiest command yet. System_override. Enforcer_prime_protocols equals null. The Enforcer Prime froze, its systems locking up as its core programming was temporarily erased. It stood motionless, a statue of metal and light. Ethan saw his chance. He charged forward, pulling a shard of energy-infused metal from the rubble, a makeshift weapon. But as he raised it to strike, the console blared a final warning. Imminent deletion. Console overload detected. He'd pushed too far. The override command was draining the console's last reserves. If he delivered the blow, the console might shatter, taking his access with it. Or worse, deleting him along with it. He hesitated for a second, looking at the frozen Enforcer Prime, at Alara's shocked face, at Maya and Marcus watching with hope and fear. This was the moment. The architect's control, the system's order, it all hinged on this. For a world without chains, Ethan whispered, and plunged the shard into the Enforcer Prime's core. Light erupted, a blinding, white-hot explosion that consumed the courtyard. Ethan felt the console scream in his mind, then go silent. The world dissolved into pain and noise, and he knew nothing more. The world returned in fragments. First came the pain, a deep, throbbing ache that radiated from Ethan's chest down to his fingertips. Then the smell, ozone and burnt metal, the acrid scent of scorched earth, and something else, something organic and wrong. Finally, sound filtered through the ringing in his ears, distant shouts, the crackle of dying energy fields, the soft, wet sound of something collapsing nearby. Ethan forced his eyes open. The sky above Orion Academy was a bruised purple, streaked with the fading remnants of the system's energy signatures. Where the central courtyard had once stood, a place of pristine white stone and glowing training holograms, there was now a crater 30 feet wide, its edges melted into glassy, blackened slag. Smoke rose in thin tendrils from a dozen smaller fires scattered across the ruined campus. The once proud walls were breached in multiple places, their magical reinforcements flickering erratically before dying completely. He was lying on his back at the crater's edge, half buried under debris. With a groan, he pushed himself up, gritting his teeth as shards of pain lanced through his ribs. His vision swam, then cleared. 10 feet away, the Enforcer Prime lay motionless. The creature, once a perfect fusion of humanoid form and crystalline system tech, was now a broken thing. Its armor was shattered, revealing the pale, synthetic flesh beneath, crisscrossed with glowing cracks that pulsed weakly before fading to black. The shard Ethan had driven into its core, a jagged piece of his own overloaded console, still protruded from its chest, smoking faintly. The Enforcer's eyes, once burning with cold blue light, were dark and empty. Dead. Finally dead. Ethan let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. The relief was immediate and overwhelming, followed just as quickly by a wave of dizziness. He slumped forward, catching himself on his hands. His interface flickered in the corner of his vision, glitching badly. Admin console status, critical damage. Integrity, 12%. Functions available, basic stat view, minor variable editing, restricted. Warning, core systems offline. Rebuild required. 12%. He'd started the battle at 98. The override command, the desperate gamble that had frozen the Enforcer long enough for him to strike, had nearly wiped the console completely. Now it was a ghost of its former self, barely functional. He could still see his own stats, could maybe tweak a variable or two if he pushed it, but the deep edits, the real-time physics rewrites, the system-wide overrides, those were gone. For now, Ethan, the voice was raw with panic. Maya emerged from the smoke, her scout's leathers torn and stained with soot. Her eyes widened as she took in the scene. The crater, the dead Enforcer, Ethan kneeling in the wreckage. She skidded to a halt beside him, dropping to her knees. You're alive. Thank the system. No, screw the system. You're alive. Barely, Ethan croaked. His throat felt like sandpaper. The others? Scattered. Wounded. But we held. Maya's gaze drifted to the Enforcer. You actually killed it. We killed it, Ethan corrected. He remembered Maya's distraction, the way she'd drawn its attention at a critical moment, giving him the opening he needed. Where's the army? Retreating. For now. Maya helped him to his feet. He swayed, and she steadied him, her grip firm. The glitches you created, the gravity wells, the randomized targeting, they disrupted their coordination. When the Enforcer went down, they lost their command signal. They're pulling back to regroup. Ethan nodded, his mind already working. A temporary reprieve. The system wouldn't stay away for long. It would analyze the battle data, adapt, and return with something worse. They had bought time, not victory. Together, they picked their way through the ruins. The academy was a graveyard of broken dreams. Classrooms were collapsed, libraries burned, training halls reduced to rubble. Here and there, survivors moved through the wreckage, students, teachers, a few of Ethan's allies from the glitch resistance. He saw Leo, a burly tank class with a minor anomaly that let him absorb kinetic energy unpredictably, hauling a beam off a trapped first year. Sarah, a healer whose spells sometimes inverted to cause damage instead, was kneeling beside a wounded elite, her hands glowing with unstable light. No one cheered as Ethan passed. They just watched him, their expressions a mix of awe, fear, and uncertainty. He was the one who'd fought the Enforcer, the one who'd wielded powers no one understood, the traitor who'd saved them. In what remained of the central hall, they found the remnants of the leadership. Headmaster Valerius, his ceremonial robes torn, stood over a map projected from a cracked terminal. He looked up as Ethan entered, his face grim. "Ethan," he said, his voice tired. "The enforcer? Dead." Valerius closed his eyes for a moment. "And the system?" "Retreating. But it'll be back." Ethan leaned against a broken pillar, trying to look more confident than he felt. "We need to evacuate. Now." "Evacuate?" One of the elite clan heirs, a fire mage named Kale, stepped forward, his expression furious. "This is our academy. We held them off. We should fortify and fight." "With what?" Maya snapped. "Half our defenses are gone. The system knows our layout now. They'll come back with reinforcements, and next time they won't hold back." "She's right," Valerius said quietly. "The academy is lost. Our priority is survival." He looked at Ethan. "You have a plan?" Ethan met his gaze. The headmaster had suspected him for weeks, had watched him with those keen, calculating eyes. But now, there was no accusation there. Only a desperate hope. "We go underground," Ethan said. "The city ruins to the east, the old subway tunnels, the bunkers. The system's sensors have trouble penetrating that deep. We can set up a base there, regroup, and plan our next move." "And then what?" Kale demanded. "Hide forever?" "No," Ethan said, his voice hardening. "Then we fight back. Not just against the monsters or the enforcers. Against the system itself." A murmur ran through the room. Valerius studied him. "You think that's possible?" "I know it is." Ethan pushed off the pillar, standing straighter. "The system isn't invincible. It has rules. Flaws. I've seen them. And I have tools." He didn't elaborate. "They didn't need to know about the damaged console. Not yet. But we can't do it here. We need time. And secrecy." Valerius nodded slowly. "Very well. We evacuate. Gather whoever you can trust, Ethan. We'll leave in 2 hours." The next hours passed in a blur of frantic activity. Ethan moved through the ruins, pulling together his allies. Maya, Leo, Sarah, a handful of others with minor glitches who'd proven loyal. They gathered supplies, medical kits, preserved food, weapons scavenged from the dead. They helped wounded students, guided the disoriented through the rubble. As they worked, Ethan kept one eye on his interface. The console's integrity had stabilized at 12%, but it was sluggish, unresponsive. He tried a minor edit, targeting a piece of debris to make it slightly lighter for lifting. The command took 3 tries to execute, and the effect was weak, barely noticeable. He cursed under his breath. "It's bad, isn't it?" Maya said softly, appearing at his shoulder. She'd always been too observant. "It's damaged," Ethan admitted. "Most of its functions are offline. Can you fix it?" "I don't know." He looked at her. "But I have to try." She nodded, her expression serious. "We'll help. Whatever you need." By the time the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the ruined academy, the evacuation was ready. A column of survivors, perhaps 200 in total, a fraction of the academy's former population, gathered at the eastern gate. They carried what they could, their faces etched with exhaustion and loss. Valerius stood at the head of the column, his back straight despite his injuries. "We go to the old city," he announced, his voice carrying over the crowd. "We survive, and we remember what was taken from us." Ethan stood at the rear with his group, watching as the column began to move, slipping out of the broken gates and into the twilight. The academy behind them was a silhouette against the darkening sky, a monument to a world that no longer existed. "You coming?" Maya asked. "In a minute," Ethan said. "I need to check something." She hesitated, then nodded and followed the others, leaving him alone in the courtyard. He turned back to the crater, to the dead enforcer. The shard was still there, embedded in its chest. With effort, he pried it loose. It was cool to the touch now, its surface etched with faint, glowing runes that pulsed weakly. A fragment of his console, infused with the enforcer's own energy. He held it up, and his interface flickered. Fragment detected. Enforcer core shard. Compatibility, 87%. Rebuild sequence initiated. Ethan's breath caught. The console was trying to rebuild itself, using the shard as a component. He focused, willing the process to continue. The runes on the shard brightened, and a stream of data flowed into his interface, visible as shimmering lines of light in the air. Rebuilding. 15%. 20%. It was slow. painfully slow. But it was working. He sat there in the gathering dark, watching the progress bar creep upward. Around him, the ruins were silent, save for the whisper of the wind through broken stone. He thought about everything that had brought him here. The system apocalypse, the discovery of the console, the battles, the betrayals, the alliances. He thought about the rogue AI that had created the console, the message it had left him. Use my power to break the chains. He'd broken some chains today, but others remained, thicker and stronger. Rebuilding. 45%. 50%. The console's interface began to stabilize, new functions flickering into existence. Not all of them. The deep edits were still offline. The system overrides grayed out, but more than before. He could see stat adjustments returning, variable editing with fewer restrictions. It was a start. Finally, the progress bar reached 100%. Admin console status. Rebuilt, partial. Integrity, 62%. Functions available. Advanced stat view, moderate variable editing, localized environmental tweaks. Warning, core systems still offline. Further fragments required for full restoration. 62%. Not perfect, not even close, but it was enough. Enough to fight, enough to plan. Ethan stood, pocketing the now dull shard. In the distance, he could see the last of the evacuation column disappearing into the ruins of the city. His people, his responsibility. He brought up the console interface one last time. It glowed steadily in his vision, no longer flickering, its lines clean and sharp. He looked at it, then at the ruined academy, then at the dark horizon where the system's forces waited. A slow smile touched his lips. Time to write my own rules. He turned and walked into the night, following the path his allies had taken, the console's light a steady beacon in the dark.